Thank you for tuning in today for another round of what we are calling LSQ Conversations. This is intended to be distinctly different from Sunday teachings and Q&R Podcast in the sense that we want to learn from members of our community. So we gather each month to discuss topics that are surrounding our community. These conversations are meant to be raw, human, so that the average person feels like they can relate no matter what season of life they find themselves in. We recently went through a sermon series titled Real Relationships. So to that end, today we will be discussing specifically what it's like to navigate friendships in New York City. Real friendships might seem difficult, especially if you're new to New York. Even if you've been here a long time, relationships might feel difficult to establish deep and lasting friendships. And so, my name is Caroline Hicks. I am the host of these conversations, and I'm excited to introduce Kate Hall and Erica Heffner, who have joined us for this conversation specifically. Ladies, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Considering even just the scope of your relationship, I know this will be such an incredible conversation. So, let's start there. Why don't you begin with giving a brief introduction of who you are, but then maybe also incorporate how you know each other, like where you became friends, and how you ended up in New York City. So, who would like to start?
Do you want to start us?
Yeah, I'll start. So I'm Kate Hall. I'm a teacher and a member of LSQ for a really long time since it started. I've been in New York for about a little over 12 years. And Erica and I moved up together, actually, so we've been here the same amount of time. And we weren't friends before we moved up. Actually, it's a part of our story, but we became really close, obviously, once we moved up here, and God just kind of brought our lives together here. I'm a mom, and I have a husband, Drew Hall, and
Your daughter, Neri.
And daughter, Neri, yes.
Yep, and I'm Erica, and I've been in the city also for about 12 years now. I'm an executive assistant, and I moved up with Kate. We knew each other in college, and we can talk more in detail about what that looked like, but we came up very much what felt like a little bit on a whim, and just trusted the Lord to do big things with us. And we've lived together for about 8.5 years before Kate and Drew got married.
Yes.
That is truly incredible.
Yeah.
So you moved up here together, but really didn't know each other very well.
Yeah.
And so, I would love to begin with talking about kind of that initial year in New York. And what was your experience with kind of building friendships? Did you find it difficult? I understand that you had each other, but it is interesting that maybe you didn't know each other well. So just speak to that experience.
Yeah. Well, we met each other through a ministry in college. And Erica was a little bit older than me, and so we weren't always as close in college. We had our own friendships and friend groups. But then I've always wanted to move to New York, and Erica was like, I'm going to go be a nanny in New York, and do you want to come with me? And I said, that'd be really fun. I'll take a year and come up. So the Lord just really opened doors for us to come up. I think we mentioned that something that was really key to that beginning of the year was prayer. Before really even knowing each other, we remember calling each other on the phone and just like having specific things we were praying for our move on every day. And we moved up here. That was like a big part of our starting a friendship, was just prayer and the Lord and centering Him. Like He was the center of our friendship from the start, which I think was like really bonding and binding. So that's kind of the beginning. The Lord really provided jobs right off the bat after a lot of prayer. Our apartment, finding an apartment was a whole act of the Lord and took a lot of prayer. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I think kind of going along with your, the first year, that was still a huge part for us. It really was just the two of us a lot. We had each other, and that was awesome. We were so grateful to have one another. But we would go to things often, and we'd leave and really felt like we met no one, or no one really engaged with us, or we keep trying over and over to go to things and be present, and it was really difficult. Those first probably 2 years they were lonely, even having a deep friendship that we had created. There were still lots of times that we would come home just feeling kind of sad. And that was another place that we would continue to pray about. Prayer is definitely a core of our friendship, and it was something we prayed often about, is what would it look like, Lord, for you to provide a community that's not just people we see on a random basis, but people that we really know deeply and can connect deeply to, and really people who know and love the Lord as well. And so I think that was kind of where we went with a lot of our desires, even in the future, for community and how that could look.
And I feel like we saw the Lord answer prayer in so many other areas. It's like we knew that he could answer prayer in community, but it was a longer, I think, journey, or like longer time than we expected. So it was like we were waiting together for friends that would like know us both deeply. I feel like, and would include us. And we saw in like we had an older women's group that we were part of, that they were really close, so we saw what it could look like. And so we kept praying for it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Having, I think, people who had been in the city, that was a lot of our core group. We first moved up where people have been here 10 and 12 years, like we were. And so I think to see that, like Kate said, we knew it was possible, but we also felt a little disconnected from that because that wasn't us. We hadn't been here that long. We were young. And so I think having kind of a vision and also knowing that it was possible to stay in the city long term, I think both of us really had no idea how long we would be here.
I think your story is so relatable. I would hope that anyone listening or watching would probably, say, me too. It's so hard at first, and you put yourselves out there, or you put yourself out there, and you just think, it's gonna happen, but it's hard. And one word that you used was lonely. And so I would love to just dig a little deeper into that, because I think at the heart of it, what's so hard about trying to build friendships is feeling lonely. And so I want to ask you, what do you think are some healthy and unhealthy ways of coping with loneliness, knowing that maybe that's someone's reality right now, or maybe it's a reality someone's going to face soon. Friendships also, New York is very transient. Friendships come and go. So whether it's from personal experience or just maybe from your own wisdom, what are some healthy and unhealthy ways of coping with loneliness?
I think some unhealthy ways of coping with loneliness can definitely be busying yourself. I think sometimes when you feel lonely, you can get super busy and you just feel like you can fill your day with all of these sort of meaningless things that then you end up feeling lonelier at the end of the day because people still don't know you. And I also think the complete opposite of that, of sort of staying in your space and not branching out and feeling kind of isolated. I think those are really easy things to get caught up in, and ultimately I think it's not coming to the Lord. I think for me personally with loneliness, one of the biggest things, especially when we were in our first couple of years, and even now in my 12 years here, I can still feel really lonely at times. And I think if I don't approach that with the Lord and come to him saying, this is how I feel, because it's a feeling. It's not true necessarily. I'm not alone. The Lord is with me. Kate was with me. Deep, meaningful friendships were present in my life, but I felt lonely. And I think that has been a huge thing, is coming to him, coming to the scriptures, seeing it in the Psalms, and really experiencing the friendship of Jesus as well, because I think in order to have any deep and meaningful friendship, you have to also understand the friendship of Jesus and how he cares for us and how he loves us and what kind of companion he is. But and I think one of the other things maybe too to add to that is Kate in general, when we did move up the depth of our friendship, it helped, like being able to come to someone and say, this is how I'm feeling. I'm just feeling lonely. It's a vulnerable thing to tell somebody that you feel lonely, or you feel like you're not connecting, or you don't have these friends. And that was a huge gift from the Lord, that we had that with one another. I think we could really share those feelings with each other, and those just emotions that we were experiencing were very similar, which was wonderful. Not everybody has someone who can walk through that space with them.
And it was a growth to realize that we necessarily couldn't fill the void for each other. Like there's a certain level of I would when you would come to me being lonely, it's like, oh, I feel guilty, but then it's like the Lord is ultimately the one that can bring you whole. So how do I point Erica back to the Lord, or bring truth, scriptures to her mind when things are lonely? And I would also just say, I know I had times in New York where I would just go from group to group, or just like say yes to a lot of different people, or just like run myself ragged of like I was a crazy person, but like I was out a lot seeing friends, like coffee. I just said yes to like probably the expense of my health, to be honest, at some point. And I mean, Erica, I would say often would gently like question like, hey, is that like life-giving, or like is this person really giving you wise counsel, or like the thoughts that are like encouraging? And I think if for someone to be able just to take stock and be like, who are people that are naturally coming into my life? Who are people that I naturally connect with, that I'm not striving to connect with? And but there were times for me where I was like being of someone for somebody to be in a group, or like trying to like at the expense of myself meet other people. And so I feel like that's an unhealthy way to deal with loneliness. And so through just scripture and the Lord, like really asking the Lord, like, who is in my life? Like, who do I connect with? Who shares same values, or who has similar schedules to me, or just those kind of things. Of that's another way to kind of deal with loneliness and meet, I think, other people that are life-giving and like will be deep friends, and not just like hang out buddies or something, you know?
Yeah. So it's interesting that you kind of even brought up that differentiation of friendships. Arthur Brooks, who teaches a class at Harvard on human happiness, he has outlined what he calls 3 different levels of friendship. So stick with me if you can. One is the friendship of transaction, which I think we can understand, right? A lot of times that's at work. It's mutually beneficial, but it's transactional. Then the next is the friendship of admiration. So a lot of times it's kind of, what can I, get out of this relationship? Or maybe it's something you admire about the person, or something that they have, and it's, something that you gain from that relationship. And so, and it could be a shared interest as well. And then what he defines as the richest and the deepest friendship is one of virtue. And he defines it as, it's useless in the sense you're not trying to get something external from it. So I think the Christian perspective, right, is that it's selfless, and that maybe you care more about the other person than you do yourself. Like I care more about what I'm giving to this relationship than I do what I'm gaining from it. It's really hard to find those relationships. So, especially in New York City, when we know so many people are struggling with loneliness, struggling with friendships, recognizing that probably a lot of those are transactional, and that's okay. All those relationships aren't bad. It's just the levels of them.
Right.
So recognizing that, how would you identify like helping someone move from a transactional relationship to a deep relationship if they're longing for that? Like how do you, maybe a lot of people would identify having transactional relationships because they're at work, or they're their neighbors, or whatever. So what encouragement and advice would you give to kind of moving in a deeper relationship, like direction? Does that make sense?
Yep.
I feel like it's funny enough, as you go through all of that, I think of our years of friendship, and it kind of a little bit started out as like transactional of like, we need a roommate, someone that can move up. And then it was like, now I admire Erin, how she does life with people, and I want to learn from her, and like she's like in growing my relationship with the Lord in our conversations, and hopefully me to her too. And then it was like, as time went on, we're committed, like we are for each other. Like we have now walked through so much life and seasons and like heartbreak and joys that it's like we're bonded. And I think there are times where you have like a DTR friendship and you're like, hey, can we commit to this? Or I really want to commit to you. And that's how you can be deeper. But also sometimes it takes time and just faithfulness and like steadiness with a friend, and just like not giving up, and just saying like, hey, I'm in this. Like I'm not going anywhere. Like even when things are hard, even when there's conflict or there's things we don't agree on, or things are refining, like I'm not going anywhere. So I think it's like part of it is embracing hard, I guess, too, and time with people. Yeah. I don't know.
Would you add anything?
Yeah, no, I think that was that was good. Very well said. Yeah.
Do you have an example, Erica, of a relationship or a friendship that moved from transactional to a deeper place, other than Kate? Because that's amazing. I had no idea that you would have defined the relationship that way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Yeah, I do think you're right. That is an interesting, like a growth pattern. I think probably the biggest thing with those relationships, it's usually an amount of, either life lived together where you go through things. Sometimes it can be, I think suffering is a big thing that can, grow people closer, but just shared experiences. But I do think that a lot of it is just the vulnerability that gets shared between that. And if you are willing to be vulnerable, then you often find that other people are too. So I think some of that is just, if that's what you're looking for, then you have to set that too as an example. So you can't just come into these relationships and be superficial or just share the surfacey things, just talk about your work or whatever it is that feels more, honestly, it feels easier, but really getting to the harder things. And whether it is Kate or other friends, I think being able to have those people that you can share hard things with and tell them things about you. But that's a big part of trust, and that has to be built, and knowing that you can say things to someone or even come with like your shortcomings and your sin, I think is a huge part of friendship deepening, and you have to be able to trust somebody in order to do that. So I think that's probably, it is an interesting point that it can kind of be.
Yeah. And maybe people have deep, I mean, I think there's people that say they met their best friend in college and it was like a click, and so like you might have that deep friendship right off the bat where it's like we are kindred spirits and we get each other, and like our souls just feel like they know each other. So I don't want to say that like it always has to move in that progression, but
that is
it
rare.
can be. Yeah.
And don't be discouraged when it is.
Right.
Like if it feels superficial, there's ways for you to, if you're enjoying, that friendship, there's ways for you to grow it and to get deeper.
I think it's safe to say that vulnerability is hard no matter where you are on the scale of a friendship with someone. Why do you think that is? Or what are the obstacles to vulnerability? Because I loved that point you just made, Erica, about how that's so key in deepening your friendship. But that is also so hard, easier said than done. So why is that?
Yeah, I think it's to be fully known and fully loved. Like that's what the Lord gives us, but not every friendship is that. Not every friendship will love you when you're fully known. And that is, I think it's just such a risk. It is so risky. It makes you feel really, there's a lot of insecurity that can come with that. I think, just being able to be yourself and hope that someone accepts that and wants that is a big deal for a lot of people. And some people it's just a little bit easier, but for many people, there can be fear, a lot of fear in that.
Or shame. I feel like you're really like you could be ashamed of something or be worried to disappoint them, or like that you're not worthy of their friendship if you were to share this, or like what would they think if they really knew? I mean, or like would I be failing them if I shared this, if I'm having this issue about this something? I think like there's just a lot of you want to cover up, right? We don't want to. It's so crazy because you're like the way to be fully loved is to be most open. But that's also the most risky or like the hardest, So it's like I want it, but I don't want it.
Because it's safe to say that either we have or many people have experienced being vulnerable and it backfiring or it leading to like a negative experience. And so that is where the risk comes from, on top of all the things that you mentioned. But when it does happen and it's received with love and you do feel known, like how magical, it's really intimate.
Right.
And then I think that's what leads to a commitment and a friendship, and so let's move in that direction. Let's talk about kind of does commitment in a friendship look like?
I think we have a mentor of ours, Sandy Taylor, who talks a lot about covenantal friendship, and that covenants are not just for marriage, but there are covenants all throughout the scriptures, whether it's Jonathan and David or the Lord to us, that there really are these relationships that are bound in the Lord and bound eternally too. I mean, that's the greatest gift of friendship, is that it is eternal. Friendship is the most eternal of all the relationships. And so I think, there's something just really beautiful about viewing it in that mindset, because then you aren't just going to jump ship when things are hard. And we've had lots of hard seasons, and there's never a time where you think, I don't want to be their friend. because when you view them in a covenant friendship, I think it does create this, and there's, of course, when there's unhealthy things, there's a difference in that, but as a whole, just the normal struggles that come up, you actually work through them, and you approach each other in that.
And I would think it's a, the commitment is also an agreement between the both of you. I think that's a kind of important thing, because I would say it's about, I don't want to say you don't want to overshare, but don't be over vulnerable. You don't want to be vulnerable to every single person that you meet. It's important to kind of have a mutual kind of commitment to each other. We're both committing to be vulnerable. We're both committed to be accepting of each other in the hardship. And I think with all of that we've gone through, I think we both have, that's just been kind of our mentality and our heart of I'm not going anywhere. I'm very conflict averse, and I don't like conflict, and Air is really good at bringing things up gently, or is not afraid of any kind of conflict. That has been a really big growth area for me, and that was something that was new in a friendship. So most of the time in friendships, when people have conflict, for me it's okay, peace out, we're done. But Air was I'm sharing this with you, and we're gonna have conflict, but we're also gonna resolve the conflict, and we're gonna see how it can make us more close, So I think it's just committing to the good and the hard, and realizing that this isn't going anywhere. Like you're saying, it's eternal.
And what about commitment through different stages and seasons of life? Let's talk specifically about your experience, even when you were living together, single, and, navigating, trying to make friends, or maybe going out on dates.
Yeah.
That's one stage, so what does commitment look like in that space?
Yeah. So I feel it has been a shift, because like you're saying, we were both single when we first moved here. So it was very much somewhat easy to commit, because it was similar stages where we understand where we're coming from. I feel like we've had our different friends, but then also similar friends. We all had had our own spaces, but we were committed to kind of really every day. We was a lot of debriefing, a lot of just encouragement, and again prayer, and pointing out the scripture. We just talked about we were also committed to talking about the Lord's work in our life a lot. And then I feel like as I started dating, or Erin started dating, it was we still, part of that was giving each other space to explore and meet other people, but also kind of hold each other accountable of okay, how is it going? What is the dating life like? And I would say for me, it's been really humbling how Air's been committed, even as I've been dating my husband, and then coming into engagement and marriage. I think that's been really neat to see how it's easy to be committed to someone who's in a similar stage of life, but it's harder. It can be harder when you're how do we connect? We have different life stages, or priorities. Things change. Time is different. But we've just been really, I think we both know the value and the gift that we bring to each other's life, no matter what stage. And so that's been something we both have prioritized. And I knew coming into marriage and in dating, that I really wanted to commit to female friendships still, even in that season. And so it may look different. I'm not, but Era was always someone I wanted to commit to, because it was something that would make my marriage stronger, or being a mother stronger, or my motherhood stronger. So that's kind of, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question.
No, that's sweet. Yeah, I think similarly, I think Kate has done a really good job of being an intentional friend. I think it's super easy when you are newly married, or especially a new mom. There's a lot of responsibility, and there's a lot that can distract and kind of pull away, and it's not intentional. And I think that's something too that I do think single to married friends also need to, there's a lot of grace that needs to be given, of there's just a lot that's shifting. So I think it is important for that, but also Kate and Drew have really prioritized our friendship. And so everything from Drew being a great husband who gives a lot of space for Kate to have girlfriends and go do those kinds of things, I think is a huge thing. But also I think for me, it's been a really wonderful gift to become a part of their family. And I think that's a hard shift maybe for some people, but I do think that's really important to grow with your friends in the place where they are. And so with Kate and Drew and Neri, they have brought me into their family in every stage, so I haven't felt uncomfortable. It doesn't feel it does feel different, but it also doesn't in a lot of ways. It feels like it's just a natural extension of what we already had, and that is so helpful. But a big part of it, is them prioritizing it, like Kate said, and really allowing me to come. And we have weekly dinners and really like take that time. And I think that's a big way to step into it. But it has to be both people have to say, like, we're going to continue to prioritize that. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And I feel like because we felt like it's been a covenantal bond and like we feel like sisters in Christ, we're family. And so it's like that's part of it too, is that as I've grown a family with Drew and Neri, but Eric is also my family, and so it's just part of our lives to include her in our everyday life. Like if we're going for a walk, like come meet us for a walk, or just come for dinner and help clean up. Like it's not like we're hosting and performing, it's just come and be a part of our life. And Eric enters in seamlessly and has given us grace to do that, but also like it's a joy, and it's so fun for Neri to have and Eric come, or like someone else. I think it's important. I know Sam Oliver also talks about this too, of like the importance of just including, especially married couples and families, including single people in their home, of just like that's a way to really build the body of Christ and just show Christ, they be the family that we're supposed to be.
I love that imagery of friendship is like family, or it is family. Friendship as family. Yeah. And I have found that my experience is that I have felt that and experienced that so deeply in New York, where I think that might come as a surprise to those who don't live here. Is that actually possible? But there's something about New York that can foster these relationships. And maybe it's because for many of us, we don't have biological family in the city. And so oftentimes our friends play that role. And so I love that you described it as that. And I know that to be true for the two of you. Would you like to elaborate at all, maybe even on just that concept of, friendship as family, and especially kind of thinking back to when we talked about loneliness and how someone's like, oh, I so desire that, and just expand on what that could look like. And I think for someone, not just to long for it, but what could it look like for them to take the steps towards being that for someone as well?
I think so. I think part of it is, I challenge like married couples and families to create space for, I think, single friends. I don't mean to like be super ostracizing and like labeling of that, but I think that it's so easy as a family to get stuck in your rhythms or like go in your own way, and not realizing like just creating one night a week where you have, I think Justin Whitley in Habits of Household talks about having like a table set with one extra chair, and just be like once a week, just have one other person come and join your meal, and it just not be super elaborate, but just be like, we're having, like we do salmon Mondays and we're having salmon, so that's what we're doing. We do that every Monday night. So it's just not super elaborate. They're not wanting to come to like a major party or something, but just like come into your life. And so I think I just challenge, married couples and families to seek out or see if there's someone in their life that could be single and looking for community or just family to be with. And then maybe you can speak that maybe singles, how they want to enter in, but I think it's just creating space for that. And it might seem daunting or be like a lot. I can't add one more thing to my calendar, but I think it's not as challenging as it needs to be. Just like be very simple, And I think I've heard people say like, I'm going to go grocery shopping. You want to come with me to go shopping? Like simple life things,
everyday life things,
right? And that can just be. But just to your point, I feel like New York does create need for friends to be family, because we don't have family necessarily biologically near us. So it's really necessary that we just help support each other. And so that's true for singles as well. Like they don't have their family with them either. Yeah. So how do we, as married couples and families, include them?
Yeah. And I think, just to add to the single side of it, I think that it's very easy to, kind of be in your rut and you kind of do your things. And whether it's that you're only hanging out with single people, which I think is not healthy, and I don't think it's, the best thing. I think there should be diversity in that. But it does give a lot of joy to be around families and children. If it's something that, especially as a single person, you're wanting, those things can be maybe not fulfilled in the exact way that you would hope them to be, but they can really be fulfilled with being around family and being with children and having a family structure. Often that can really help to not completely take away those lonely feelings or those desires that you might have in marriage, but I do think that when you're caught up in your life stage and that's all you ever experience, you are missing so much that comes from being with friends who are in different life stages. And there's just a lot of joy that comes from being with families and kids, especially when they're dear friends. It's a joy to get to see your friends be married or have children, and we should be able to rejoice in that.
Absolutely. And I think of family as oftentimes what we consider when we're making big life decisions. So do you think it's too much to consider friendships when making big life decisions? Like moving, you know?
I think it's definitely something that we consider. I think being committed to each other and wanting to be together and see the Lord at work. I think the neatest thing when we first moved to the city was it was just so clear the Lord was at work here, and the ways he answered our prayers immediately was through a church and through community, and it was like Christ first even before our jobs, even before our apartment. Like, it was just the Lord's at work in the city. And so we both have been really passionate about that that work, and so it has been part of our Drew and I's decision that we want to be a part of the community here, and it does feel like part of our family is here with our friends, and so we've chosen to live here with Neri. So I think it is definitely a decision that you have to consider.
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, I love New York and I love all that God is doing here, but probably one of the biggest things that keeps me here are the friends who are family. That's a huge part of why I've stayed, because I see him continually working in and through that. And and we saw that again as an example from the people when we first moved here who told us that this could be a reality of New York, and New York was special for this. And I think it's just been really sweet to see how that's been true.
Well, let's flip it and air some dirty laundry. I'm just kidding. But let's talk a little bit about conflict. We know it's there. You've painted such a beautiful picture for us, which I know is also true. But you don't have to list or name the areas of conflict. But how have you navigated that within your friendship? You can speak to your friendship or other relationships too. Just navigating conflict.
I can start.
You can start.
Yeah.
The one who's better at conflict can start.
So true.
She says I'm better. It doesn't mean I'm better. It just means I approach it. Doesn't mean I'm better at it. Kate is really good when she's in it. I think the biggest thing is addressing it. I think it's so hard to do. It's so hard to say when, a friend has hurt you or anyone has hurt you. It's so hard to say when you've been embarrassed by something someone has done to you, or there's been even just conflict in the way you're viewing life or how you're living. It can be simple things, but I think not addressing conflict it's not biblical. It is not an option. It creates so much resentment, and I think it's similar to the way we talk about that, we should put our sin out there because the enemy has a greater foothold when we don't acknowledge our sin. And I think it's very similar with conflict. If we don't acknowledge conflict, the enemy just has such a good foothold in that, and he uses that to create bitterness and anger and a lot of division. And so I think, for us personally, I do think in our hardest seasons, we were distant. We would pull away as anybody does in those kinds of tough places. And and so until you're in it, and even when we would address conflict, it didn't always mean that it was resolved immediately or one of us felt really good about it. Addressing conflict doesn't mean you feel good all the time either. And I think that's important too, because we want to just put a Band-Aid and be like, it's all better. And it's like, it can take a long time. And there were times where probably there was a year of really hard things for Kate and I both personally. We were going through different things that caused just a lot of different tensions and conflicts, and it took it just felt like every couple of weeks or months we were like going back into these things and really addressing stuff with one another. And that's not a bad thing. And I think it's easy to want to avoid it because it's hard and it's painful and it's not fun. But the depth of our friendship that came from that is incredible. I mean, truly the kind of friendship is why we can say that we are sisters and sisters in Christ because of the ways that we were able to approach conflict, I would say.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I think keeping it inside, you think that it's better, but like it's like I said, it's at the expense of yourself, and then actually your choices do affect the other person. So I think about I think it comes up in my marriage too, like even if I don't like address conflict, it can just like spill out somewhere else that if I didn't address it where it needs to. Like similar with Eric, I think about our friendship, it was like I was keeping things in and it was really unhealthy for me health wise. It was unhealthy like in a lot of areas, and like she said, didn't resolve right away, but once we addressed it, it was like, oh, we can share in this suffering. And it was a hard year of like, it's not being resolved, this is still hard, we're still praying about what the Lord wants us to do in our next steps, but we were then sharing the suffering, and it wasn't just like us like keeping the conflict in ourselves to then boil over and just be unhealthy. But it does, it was really nerve-wracking, and it is a testament to the Lord's faith, or each of our faith in the Lord, because I think there is oftentimes where you try to address conflict with someone and it might not be reciprocated, and it might be like, oh, that did not go well, or that was not received how I meant it to be received, and so I think there's a lot, when we addressed it with each other, there was a lot of prayer beforehand and a lot of humility in how we shared issues and it was really for when you finally, it has to be for the other person that you're also sharing, and not just for you to get off your chest and for you to feel good about it. But it's like, I realize, I see how, again, my choices are hurting you, and like, and that took a while for me to see, honestly. I think selfishly, I'm like, oh, it's not my fault, it's Erica's fault. She needs to get her act together. Or like, this needs to be her thing, her ish to figure out. And it's not, and so it took me to realize, like, what am I doing that's affecting this? And but then also, how can I share what she's doing is hurting me, and it's not blaming, but really like really caring for each other. And then of course, whenever you hear, I know when Eric's come to me for things, it doesn't feel good to hear what you're doing wrong and like what you need to work on. And so I think it's okay to take time to be like, I will take in your consideration what you've said. Let me really sit with the Lord and pray through it. But it's really, I think the enemy works because it's easy for me to like want to gossip or tell another friend, like, can you believe that Erica told me to work on, or like all these things? And it's like, that's not of the Lord, to be honest, So I think it's like, how do you not get mad and gossip about your close friend, but just like take it and trust the Lord. Anyway, so it's not easy, and I think it's so I don't want to gloss over like we went through conflict and now we're great.
I think one thing you both identified, sorry to interrupt, was just the continual nature of it. Yeah. You said it's not a one and done. I love that you said addressing conflict is like, or avoiding conflict is not an option. And then you said like, whether it's received well, whether you say it poorly, no matter how it lands, even if it lands well, it's going to come again. Or it's going to need to be revisited. Over and over. And so I think it's safe to say like conflict is always present. And maybe not the one single issue. But you should never walk into a friendship assuming that it's not going to be there, or that, that it won't come again. And so even just that preparedness of, okay, I'm broken. I'm fallen. I'm bringing a lot of baggage into this friendship, and so is this other person. And kind of knowing that it's going to be this continual cycle. Not to be, a Debbie Downer about it. I think it's being realistic. Reality, yeah.
And I think you do bring the Lord's redemption in it. It's like the only hope we have is that the Lord can redeem all things. And so I think about our time and season of really hard. Like, we didn't know. Honestly, it was to the point of like, I don't know if we'll get over this. I don't know if we'll be friends through this. But yet, like, so it's like you don't always know if you'll come on the other side. But the hope that you have is Christ, and the hope that you have is that He does redeem, and that you want to share the truth with your friend, because that is truth will set you free, and truth is what brings glory to the Lord ultimately. Like you don't want to just lie and cover it up. Yeah, truth and love. Exactly. Truth and love.
Is that what they say? Truth and love?
Yeah. So like if you also don't bring up conflict, it's kind of a lie. You're kind of just like acting like things are fine, but they really aren't. And so
that's what you said.
Yeah, you can't live that way.
Right.
Yeah. And it's I think also thinking the best in someone and not thinking the worst in them. It's so easy to come off with the worst of like, they did this purposefully, or someone is hurting me in this way. And often, really, that's probably more a sign of my own heart of like where I am probably struggling with something if you're thinking the worst in someone. And so I think it's important in friendship to come thinking the best in them. And Kate was a really good example for me. I had not had a lot of, like, I became a Christian later in life. And so college was my first experience with Christian friends. And I had a few friends that I could kind of walk through some of this with. But Kate was probably my first friendship that I had to step into harder things with like this. And I saw this humble and kind end. And I think that's so important as well, because like Kate said, not everyone is humble and kind and willing to step into that, and you can't force someone to do that. But I do think part of it was Kate continued to pursue the Lord, and hopefully I was also continuing to pursue the Lord. And I think that it's a huge part of it is our faith is what drove us to this, not trying to do it in our own strength, because we're weak. Like we cannot approach each other in a way that doesn't bring all of our own mess and hurt, but the Lord can, he can speak through us. And we just saw lots of redemption, like Kate said. It was really great.
What about different expectations in friendship? When maybe one person thinks of their friendship, differently than the other person. Frankly, maybe one person thinks they're better friends than the other person does. That's one example, but that is a reality. Different people come into friendships with different expectations. So speak to that.
I would say back to Era's point about grace, like I think understanding different seasons, that like your expectations might be different because of your season of life. So I think like Erica's been a really good example of, she has really realistic expectations for me in marriage and then in motherhood, because I couldn't be, when we were living together, we talked all the time, debrief the day, like we were actually bunkmates for all those years, so we would literally like go to sleep together in bunk beds every night. And so it's like that's gonna change when I'm married in a different house. So I think it's like adjusting expectations for having grace for different seasons. But I think there also are times if you need to address expectations, to be like, I'm feeling a little bit forgotten, or like I feel like right now I'm having we're off. Or I feel like there's could be something that's going wrong. Is there anything I've done? Or is there something that I would love to really commit to seeing you once a week? Or really want to commit to like having time with you, about like quality time. I feel like we're just kind of breezing by one night we see each other. Can we get a coffee and really sit down? So like I think also sharing your expectations, be like, hey, this is what I'm expecting or was hoping. How are you feeling? Or is that how you feel? And it could not be received. It could be like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were great. And you're like, oh, okay, great. So so then you adjust how you feel. But I think it's okay, again, being vulnerable to be addressing and just be like, hey, I'm expecting. But also I think it's a good heart check of like, what are you expecting? Like it does take time to sit in with yourself and be like, why am I feeling this way? What am I expecting in this? And is it appropriate or not?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Kate. Even what you were saying, it makes me think of like in a dating relationship or a marriage, you would approach expectations. You would tell that person, hey, I thought we were going to have a date a couple times a week, or I thought we were going to call on these nights, or I thought like you would challenge that if it didn't happen. You would push back a little bit. But I don't think in friendship we do that as often. We're kind of quicker to be like, oh, well, maybe I'm just not, I'm not as important, because when you're dating or you're married, there is just this natural like, well, they're my person. Of course we would do that, and I can tell them this. But I think for relationships in any capacity, it should be that way. And in friendship too, we should be able to share, this is something I'd like to see. This is how I'd love for our friendship to grow, just like we would in anything. And then I also think there's the challenge of idealizing friendship too, of putting this up to saying like it's going to be this perfect thing, and it's not. There's never a perfect friendship, and so being able to know what are your expectations too that maybe are not realistic, and you are putting them either on a pedestal or kind of putting them maybe as an idol even in your life, and how do you sort of address that appropriately so that when you come to them you're not putting all of these unhealthy expectations on them, but it's you come to the Lord first before you approach that person.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What about the struggle of our culture when it comes to individualism? And, you know, although we might all struggle with loneliness in some capacity, it also is hard to pursue friendships. And therefore you might think, what's the point? Why even begin in the first place? And I just need me, myself, and I. So, you know, we don't have much time left, but I want to address this because it is countercultural, and you have spoken so much to, you know, the spiritual aspect and the, you know, how your faith has played a role in your friendship. And so I would love for you to expand on, like, why take the risk? Why be vulnerable? What are the benefits? Like, why is God calling us into friendships? Why does he care about these covenantal friendships? To really counter what culture is saying.
Just to quickly add to that, I think you're absolutely right, because I feel like New York especially is super, like, I can do it myself. Like, I mean, everyone comes to New York to, like, make their name and, like, make their mark. And so why would I invest in people while I'm here? I don't have time for it. Or even I feel like there's been seasons, as we all know, of, you know, friends coming and going. So, like, you invest in a friendship and then you're like, shoot, they're leaving. Like, I just spent all this time.
Exhausted.
Like, why? And so then you think again, like, why would I do it again? I had to open up again. Like, I've just opened up all these years. Like, so to your point, like, that's a great question. Like, I think we have to ask ourselves a lot. Like, why do I keep doing this? Like, in New York, people is transient. People don't always stay. I think I think about, like, how Jesus modeled it with his disciples, and just the countless stories in the Bible of friendship. And marriage is important too, but I think to your point again, like Eric said before, there's so many examples that this is just what we need. Like, we need the body of Christ. We need deep friendships. And I think everyone is searching to be known, loved, and cared for, like LSQ shares. And so friendship is part of how we do that and how we are seen and loved and cared for. And it's how it can be the hands and feet of Jesus in your life. And so it can be like a physical representation of Christ. And so in your life. So I feel like it is countercultural, but I think it's something that if you ask everyone, I think they really want it down deep. They want to be cared for in that way, and so that will require being open and vulnerable, and the risk. So it's I think it's worth it because it's fulfilling, and it's
What I would add to that before Erica you answer as well is, deep down, whether people recognize it or not, they do long for it because it is what we were created for.
Yes.
It is what we were designed for, is to be in relationships.
Right.
And that happens in community, in those deep friendships. So that's what you were identifying.
Yes.
I just wanted to drive it home.
Yes. Yeah.
Erica, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right with the example of Jesus, and I've been thinking a little bit more about friendship lately, and especially how Jesus tells us that the greatest love is to lay down your life for your friend, not your husband, not your children, not anyone else, but to lay down your life for your friend. And that's what Jesus did. He laid down his life for us. And so if he calls us to that, and he calls us to model him, to mirror him to the world, then that means that as believers, we are called to lay down our life for our friends, which is humbling, and it is a sacrifice, and it isn't easy. And Jesus definitely struggled with his friendships, I'm sure, with the disciples, as they were so up and down all the time, but he chose friendship. He could have chosen, the Lord could have brought him in a very different way, and instead he brought him in to build friendship and community. And I think it is really crucial as we continue to seek the Lord. We are called then as believers to not be individuals in that, we are individuals, not individualistic. That we really decide to choose the body of Christ, and that looks different for everyone, but it is crucial, and it's the most important thing, I think, really pursue. If you're looking for that, you have to pursue the Lord, and you have to pursue what He has called us to do.
So what are some practical ways?
Yeah.
Let you know this, maybe for those at Redeemer Lincoln Square specifically. Let's start there. What are some practical ways to find that community, to seek out these friendships? Can you guys think of any, or even resources would be helpful?
Community group is huge.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing for us. Community group made a big difference. I think serving and volunteering is a way to make the church feel smaller. It's easy to get lost on a Sunday if you don't know anyone, but maybe even just a few people in your community group.
Yeah.
I think I'm being bold to just be like, hey, can I have your number? Do you want to grab coffee? Or if you talk about like a singer-songwriter you love, like doing this concert, like thinking of experiences you can share together that like, oh my gosh, I saw on Instagram that you like this too. We should do this. Or you thought you liked this restaurant. Do you want to try this new menu they have or something? Like just thinking of, like, there's so many things to do in the city too that's free. You can just go to something free. I think it's just thinking of ways to create experiences. Because sometimes like doing coffee and is hard, but like we also do lots of walks. I feel like with the park and just including I think just as you meet people at LSQ, just to not be afraid to be the first person to kind of stick your neck out. Someone has to do it, or else it's not gonna happen. So I think that happened a lot for us. Like we would just, and again, it was helpful to have another person. So I think that is a gift. But I also feel we definitely had things that we were both involved in individually that we had to kind of stick our necks out and just be like, okay, I'm going to try this on my own, and I'm going to connect with these people or try to reach out. Like we're in separate community groups too, so we have different friendships from those, and that has just been us like investing and choosing.
And I think to persevere is a huge thing. Like you have to keep trying in New York, and it's hard. It takes, it can take a year or two, and you have to keep going to the events when nothing is feeling like it's working. And to pray. I mean, prayer was, going back to what we talked about in the very beginning, it was the key part of our time here, was continuing to pray and ask the Lord for friendship. And it was one of our lists, or one of our bullets on our list was that we wanted friendship. And that was something so I think, be intentional to pray. Ask the Lord. He wants to answer you. He wants to give you good things, and He wants for you to have deep and meaningful friendships. So ask for that as well.
And I would say don't be discouraged. So I feel like we're still building friendships even in our friendship. It doesn't really stop. Like you're not going to get to a point where you've hit like ultimate community and you're done. Or like you're like, you've hit the ideal.
Until heaven.
Yeah, exactly. Until heaven. We're all looking forward to that table. But I think there's always room, and there's like I said, New York is transient. And so even being in here 13 years or 12 years, we're still making new friendships, and that's still a practice. And we want to be open to that because there are people longing to be known. And so it's, I think, practice, knowing how much we have been known and cared for in the previous years, it makes us want to be open to others. And so that's like
that's a good one.
Using,
It is good.
I think like,
been here.
but it's not easy. And so it takes time in the Word, and like, I think really using the Lord's strength to help you be open. So I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to talk to someone new, but it's like, no, Lord, you reached out to me, and in my weakness, you were strong, so I can try to seek out someone else. So I think just kind of just always continually being open, even to those who may seem like older to LSQ, be open to the new people.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, guys. What a note to end on. That was really powerful, and truly it means a lot that you were willing to just discuss what it looks like to navigate friendships, but also to share your story, the good, the bad, and beautiful and ugly. So thanks for being here, and I appreciate you both.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.